3 years ago, I decided that I was going to get in this car and do some gig driving. And it was because I couldn't do what I was doing before. I couldn't continue to work the way I was working. I folded my laptop on my kitchen table. I was burnt out. I was kind of in a crisis because I didn't know what to do next. So this is a video for anyone who's reached a point in their lives where they don't know necessarily what to do next. What's the right thing? Their head and their logic is telling them one thing, and their heart and soul is telling them another. So this is a video for you. So hold on to that thought. So in this video, I want to talk about that moment for me, but for you, for anyone out there who's going through a crisis, when I think your body and soul have made the decision. The problem is your head and your logic are saying, I can't, this can't be possible. I can't do that, but I have to do this. I've reached that proverbial fork in the road, and I'm framing it around, for me, it was more of a career lifestyle kind of thing. For you, it might be something else, not related to work. Maybe it's just continuing your education or not, or putting more time and resources into this other area, and you just don't want to do it. Maybe you need to break away from a partner. You need to step out and get help and get out of something that's just not treating you well. Whatever it may be, there's a wide array of choices. But for me, and for those of you, this video is really going to be about, the work-life situation where you can't do what you've done before professionally. You can't continue to put in hours or effort at something that's no longer sustaining you. That's just, you just loathe it, and that's the point that for me. And in this video, I want to share like 3 takeaways about that kind of process when when your brain and your ego is telling you one thing, that you got to continue to go in there, strap in, and just take the pummeling. And your heart and soul are telling you that I just can't do this anymore. There's got to be a better way. And for me, the first point is, do something different. Take the pause, put down for me, it was closing the laptop and driving strangers for Uber and for Lyft. That was my do different. And for you, it might be just, go paint the house, go take out the watercolors and start painting, go hang out more with your kids, go volunteer, go coach. It could be something completely different that you just need to do or want to do to give yourself a break. And for me, it was, I had financial pressure. And, many of you may identify that, okay, that's great, Sean, but, what and I couldn't afford to write, my memoirs, to sit at my kitchen table and just go and write stuff, which is kind of, something I contemplated doing. I needed to make a living. I needed to continue to pay the bills. My wife and I, have a young daughter, and I needed to work. I couldn't put that burden on her fully, and I didn't have a lot of savings that I wanted to I didn't want to go into my retirement fund, as minimal as it is, but it was there for me to do if I needed to. So I know for not everyone is going to have the luxury of being able to go do different in a sense where they're not getting any type of income. For me, that was my decision. So for a lot of you, there's other ways of making some income, and it may not be enough. It certainly wasn't for me, and that's where the ego comes in. That's where once you do different, make that decision, doing different, I'm going to go do this. Then you've got to figure out how you're going to, work through your life and the financial math around that and how that's going to work. And for every one of us, it's different. But for me, and for many of you, the whole point is to accept the fact that you may not be making as much, or it's going to be harder, but you need to do it. You just need to find a way through that. And, that's the part that I really want to emphasize, is that I did that. I didn't think that this was going to be leading me, necessarily. It was a temporary solution, but it felt good. It was something that I really jumped into and did. As I said, no one ever thanked me, when I showed up for work, getting, someone from point A to point B, having a great conversation, a great moment, between strangers where I was able to, really get some amazing intimacy between strangers and talking about our lives, honestly, and me showing some vulnerability and just asking some good questions, and the riders, wanting to talk to me because they're also, lonely and burnt out and isolated. And, that's how I kind of came to the conclusion that I wanted to do the gift of Lyft. So the second piece is the acceptance. I accepted what I was doing, and I really did it to the best of my ability. And it was really, in a way, it was the perfect thing for me. I needed to step away. I needed to get some perspective. I needed to get away from my kitchen table. I needed to be in motion. I like motion. I like driving. I like, doing something. And I was working. I was getting paid. It wasn't nearly as much of what I truly needed, but it was enough to get by. And that's where it's been, and it still is that. And, I'm at a place now where I'm much more confident that this is working. And I know for whatever you decide to do, and it may be a series of things. It may not just be one thing. It may be doing those other side projects or those side, volunteer things, or combining the two. For me, it was, also more time spent with, doing things with my family, my daughter, taking some trips that I wanted to do. And I just wasn't, as stressed out. I wasn't as, carrying the weight of something that I know I needed to stop doing. That was removed from me. So there was a new sense of freedom. And there was a way where I arrived at, once I kind of put my ego down, because your ego is going to tell you, especially if you're a guy, of course, as you're a human, we all have egos telling us that we could be doing something more, better, whatever, the fantasy of what we think, that is. For me, it was a fantasy because, I didn't have any other ideas of what to do. I just wanted to get to a place where I was sleeping well at night, being a good dad, and paying my bills and not going into debt. And that's what I accomplished. That's really all I've done for 3 years now is, put one foot in front of the other, pick up, one stranger after another, and pretty much call it a day. And, now I'm at a point where I'm thinking about, okay, what comes next? But before I get onto that, I kind of want to end the video here is that, the third thing is that, that huge piece of, hey, maybe I needed to go through this. I don't know. Those of you who are religious, who have a more defined sense of your belief system, might say, okay, God maybe wanted me to do this. For me, it's, the universe maybe had a plan for me. I don't know. Me, others who have no belief system whatsoever, I'm okay with that. Really, it's about, hey, how do I feel today? Where am I now versus, 3 years ago? And the proof is that I know what I know. I know I'm sleeping. I know my life's gotten better in so many ways internally, and I don't feel burned out. And I have a whole new sense of appreciation for humans as we navigate our way through this digital age, and how disconnected, I was in a way on my kitchen table alone. I knew that wasn't healthy for me, mentally, physically. Luckily I was able to, I break up my day and go running and work out. And, that was, I built that into my routine for years. But, I just knew it wasn't healthy in a sense that I wasn't meeting enough, I wasn't having enough interaction with other human beings. And, that's something that was a huge component that I got by doing this. So, whatever it is for you, for whatever you need to do, go do it. Go out there and find it, and tell me, if you could, on this channel, hey, here's what I did, here's what worked, here's what didn't, here's what's working. If you could drop a line, that would be great. And, I'd love to build a little community here of people who have, kind of done different and are doing different and are happier. So with that, I'll say goodbye for now, and thanks for checking in. And if you're going through a crisis, you got to do different. And what that is, it's up to us to figure out what that could be. And I just give you, one example for me to take away. So thanks.